Thank you very much for all your interventions, excellent interventions. This is a second panel, but all the panel is in healthcare, in 3D industry in healthcare. And you remember I am a medical doctor, and I think in first time and the end time ever in the patients, no? And the patients and the healthcare system. And we have been a lot of good solutions for different problems, for orthopedics problems, and after for children, and the preparation for the surgery, and for the different new devices, new generation of devices. We have been to how the Parliament European is studying this new field, and at the end how Dr. Samitier is talking about the bioprinting. And I don't know, but I think it's easier to develop the rapid prototyping and to develop the traditional 3D industry and new devices. But I think the future, do you know that? But I think the future is in the enable the 3D printing and biocompatible materials, because I imagine the new tissues or the new organs, because it's difficult to do that. But is your opinion in this sense or no? What will be the future challenge in additive manufacturing in the healthcare? In this direction or no? What is your opinion?
You talk about biocompatibility of 3D printing with health, how to put printed parts into a human body. There's a previous problem. It's use the prototypes into the surgical room. First of all, everyone is imagining that when we print products, to print these products in sterile conditions, by now it seems it's not, how to say it, a thing that the big manufacturers or small manufacturers are thinking about, how to print sterile, okay? Because what we are doing, people that work in 3D printing by now about this issue, about biocompatibility, is of course consider first the biocompatible materials, PLAs, special polycarbonates, and so, but there is two issues. Print, keeping the sterility of the parts, or at least before using it, how you are going to sterilize. So this is what we have in head. Materials, processing, and when applying, it's like when we imagine with food, don't break the the cold chain, something like this. No? I give the word to Arnau to talk this about the medical point of view.
Yeah, I agree that the future will come with bioprinting, and when we have solved all these problems that Fenollosa was mentioned, then the next step is how we can do all this in a normal basis in the hospital with implantable parts, and of course with new materials that are not now on the market but that will appear, that could mimic better the anatomy of the patients. So yes, I think there's big challenges and a long way to go, but I hope one day we can have that.
Another question for you, Arnau. How many hospitals do you think are working in this field in the 3D printing now?
In Spain, in the world?
In Spain and in Europe too.
I cannot give a number, but I know that in Spain there's more and more hospitals working on that. I would say more than what we may think. I know some in Seville, in Andalusia, some in the north, in Basque Country, also in Madrid, and also in Catalonia there's lots. But we are still behind what's going on Germany, for example, on the center of Europe, Belgium, and also in the States, which they are maybe, in terms of volume, 5 years before us, ahead us. Yeah.
Okay. More opinions about the future challenge. Tosa Mitier.
So, in my case, I think that for implants, the next years, tissue engineering will be one of the main options. So, the combination of natural extracellular matrix together with artificial materials and cells probably will solve the problems in many times that when the surgeons require organs, that the number of organs are limited. It's not possible to use all. The problem of the immune system in order to adapt that. So probably the use of IPS together with biomaterials in this context to produce artificial tissue engineering probably will solve. Obviously, it's not the situation today, but for me, it's clear that that will be the market for the next future.
You want to say something?
Yeah.
Robert, Teixidó.
Thanks. In my experience, there are two fields, one in long-term solutions and the other one in an early stage, which is bioprinting, would be the future, print organs, print, you need a liver, take that. But there is a lot of things that we can do now in the field of implantable medical device with the technologies that are today in this event, but we only have to make it in the proper form. The sterilization problem, the conditions of fabrications, and the regulatory, and that's all. We can make cases with, like the case that I explained it in the presentation about the 5-month-old girl that required a tracheal splint. This can be done now.
You want to say something, Lucas?
I don't know much. I don't know much about this field, but I think there are several problems with maintaining these cells alive, right? Because the blood or bigger parts than 1 centimeter square is a really huge problem, because you have to feed those cells, and maybe printing vessels or teeny vessels, but that's difficult, and is something that this field has to improve.
Well, Robert says something about the regulatory problems. What do you think, Felip, Boucher, about that? What do you say the European Union?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that all of these medical and healthcare technologies are developing alongside a much broader range of 3D printing technologies and devices that have been emerging over the last several years. But from a regulatory perspective, they're really quite different, because as soon as you define the technology or the device as being for medical purposes, you know, as soon as it's defined as a medical device, it's subject, and probably rightly so, to much stricter regulatory standards. It has to work perfectly. I mean, okay, there's always there can always be problems, but the hurdle for passing the standards is much higher for medical devices, and it's a contemporary challenge in many different technology areas, where increasingly there's a broad technology field that can be used for all sorts of different things, and then within it a subset where people are working and already having some success, as we saw today, applying it to a medical regime, but they're going to be subject to much stricter standards than the colleagues in perhaps manufacturing, for example.
Well, another question for everybody. I think do you need other technologies for your work every day. How do you imagine, what is your vision for this integration, the other technologies? I am thinking in technology or the IoT or the technologies about materials. What do you think the integration, the other technologies in the bio printing or in your work every day? What do you think about? What is your connection with the other technologies?
Well, as I have told before in my presentation, we talk about digital manufacturing. Well, digital manufacturing is plenty of things. In our floor shop, we have numerical controls and have rapid prototyping technologies. The fact that there is a bunch of technologies that, okay, must work together. But it can be treated like an encyclopedia. The world is infinite. The world is, it could be possible. So what it must be done, have to be done, is just work 2 by 2. For example, work imaginary DICOMs with files for rapid prototyping. Work stereo systems, 3D printing. So I have no other recommendation, no other solution. That there are a lot, effectively, there's a lot of connection with other technologies than 3D printing simply, and must be affronted, worked 2 by 2.
More opinions?
I think we have a void between the mass production and the customizable production, like 3D printing, and we have to attack that void because we need to customize, but quickly. And in our field, in orthotics, we have to be really rapid, really quick in applying the solution. And each solution is different than the other. So we are in that void, and of course the new materials, the combination with electronics will be very interesting. It will be, these parts will be capable of doing things that will be very helpful.
Pluridisciplinary team, no?
Yeah. I completely agree. So you need different types of technologies, but if you need to choose some of them for the development of 3D bioprinting, obviously nanotechnology and the control of the materials at the molecular level, that will be relevant. And also probably for this type of production in a small, very specific, artificial intelligence. So because you need to control the systems and the evolution of the system, because the problem is, well, we print cells and materials, but after the time zero, they are a very strong evolution of the system, and you need to control and to analyze permanently what is the evolution in order to finish with a specific maduration of the structure. So probably that, in this combination of bioreactors and combination, that will be possible to introduce artificial intelligence.
Philip?
Yeah, once again, from a regulatory perspective, I mean, for sure, 3D printing is really, really closely linked with 3D imaging. And in the end, 3D imaging is about producing really, really detailed data, more and more on data, as it gets better and better. And the gentleman mentioned the customization. So here we're talking about linking very personalized data with an individual for whom you're producing a product. And to go one step further, you mentioned in introducing the question, the Internet of Things. So if I'm right here, we imagine integrating perhaps electronics within 3D printed artifacts, which would be linked to an individual body, perhaps for a medical purpose. So here you're combining lots of data about an individual, pinpointed to that individual, perhaps even carried around with them through their whole lives, and then adding to that again, internet networking. So there's going to be, that's going to open another dimension of regulatory difficulties in terms of privacy and data protection, because all of this information could be quite sensitive. You're talking about essentially medical information pertaining to an individual. So, I mean, it's not that it's impossible, but as soon as you start combining these things, the regulatory situation becomes increasingly complicated, let's say.
Arnau?
I absolutely agree with Felip. I think we are in a moment in which that's exploding, and there's these three technologies that are combined will break and change absolutely the point in which we are now. And that combined with the fact that 3D printing gave and democratized the way we prototype and the way physicians see the possibilities they can do and to attack the surgeries, for example. They get more motivated to prove things, to go and test. And that also is something that we have to try to control somehow, or so to try to give them the space so that they can go with more ideas and try and combine these technologies, but also control in a regulatory basis.
Okay. Well, we have an excellent panel in healthcare. Do you have some questions for them?
Hello, I would like to ask your opinion. There's a huge problem right now with regulations. For example, FDA is the entity that regulates the norms and standards from USA, and has dictated a draft of additive manufacturing and what should be validated when it's applied on medical fields regarding to the technology of FDM. What is your opinion on when should be regulated, why, and how? That's my question.
Excellent question. The answer is yours.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on developing sets of options which policymakers could take in order to shape in different ways technology development. In my role in the research department, we're not here to say it's better if you do that or better to do that. So I can't make any comment on that. But certainly by studying the future and anticipating different development paths, we hope to give parliamentarians the information that they need to make choices aligned with their convictions about when and how to regulate. So we study different options, including the American model. I mean, overall, we could say, I mean, if you're talking about restrictive regulations, let's say to increase protections of consumers, for example, there's a danger that this can slow down technology development, and it's a political choice whether you think it's worth slowing it down in order to have these protections in place, or whether it's a risk that falling behind, once again, behind the states in advancing the technology. But this is a question for a politician.
Concerning, it's very interesting your question. So, concerning that, we can move at this moment between two models. So, the model of in the case of 3D bioprinting, the case of organ transplantation, if you use cells from the patient and extracellular matrix from donors or natural tissue, or we can move from the situation of a traditional implant, medical implants, and in this case it is a medical technology that you need to validate the technology. So in the case of bioprinting, my suggestion is that we need to develop systems more near to the organ transplantation validation. Obviously, that perhaps is not the same case for implants produced, the traditional implants, but at this moment produced using 3D printing. So that is probably one question that the people more involved with that need to analyze what will be the best option. But I agree. If will be not possible to validate the one product by product, perhaps you can validate the process as all, and in this case that can be used. If you use this process, all systems produced using this process will be validated.
Okay, the last question for me, while finishing the roundtable, but quickly, which are for you the next steps in your field, everyone, the next steps?
In my field, I think that for implantable medical devices, it's important to make organization, something to put printers, medical teams, and engineers working together, trying to make something with the actual technologies, and keep investigating in the fields of bioprinting, new materials, and new printing technologies.
Thank you. In the hospitals?
For hospitals, I think organize a service that can help physicians use 3D printing in their normal basis as with the technology we have today, and then continue helping and teaming with other industry research groups and universities to continue with the research in materials, bioprinting, and other fields.
Very simple, mimicking human tissue with affordable technology.
Fantastic.
For us, the aim is always to try and define a technology development path that's aligned with European values. Although this is quite an abstract thing to define, the next step for us will certainly be to finish the project, which will hopefully help us to do exactly that over the next 5 years.
From the technological point of view, in our case, the use of the co-culture of cells together with different type of materials, and for some specific application that perhaps will be more easy to develop or to plan clinical trials in the next 2 or 3 years.
In our field of orthotics, of course, the printing time is very important for us, and to make the process of scanning as easy as possible.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of challenge and a lot of work for the next years, and thank you very much for your intervention and for the panel in healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you all. Wonderful. The level of expertise